Welcome back to another construct video, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can make your very first top-down zombie shooter. Let's get started. First thing you want to do is just right click anywhere and insert a new object. Scroll down until you see the word sprite, and we should give all our sprites a name, so I'm just going to name this one player. Click anywhere to place it into your level, and we open the editor. If you've never used the editor before, it is like Microsoft Paint almost. You can create your sprites in here. The most important thing is most of the behaviors operate on the fact that an object is created with angle 0. What I mean by this is that when you create an object, it should be facing towards the right. So I'm going to import an image and you'll see what I mean by this. So here's my sprite. This is created by a man named Kenny. I'll leave a link to all his gaming work. And as you can see, he's facing towards the right. Now, before we leave this editor mode, there's a couple of things that we can sort out while we're here. The first one is we're going to click on the collision polygon. Now, Construct will try and give you a collision polygon when you create a new object, but we want to edit this one. What I'm going to start with is just right clicking and set to the bounding box. This is what you'll see if you've created your own sprite. And all we want to do is create a rough hitbox shape. Now, this character is quite big, but actually all I want for the hitbox to be is his body. So I'm going to reposition a couple of these points. You can see that 4 is not going to be enough to clearly represent his shape. So I'm just going to double click and this will give me a new point. This doesn't need to be perfect. You're just getting a very rough shape. So again, I'm just going to get my final points in. And there we go. There's our hitbox sorted. Another thing we're going to sort out is actually being able to shoot from the weapon. Currently we've got our origin point. This should be the very center of your object. So mine's slightly out. Again, I want to focus this around the body of the player because that's where he's going to be turning. He's not turning around by his nose, he's turning around by his body. But we also want to add a second image point. So I'm just going to right click to add a new image point. And this is going to be where we fire from. If you don't put anything on there, this is going to be your default where you're going to shoot your gun from. So it's going to shoot, in my case, from his nose. I'm just going to move this to the end of his gun. So he's going to fire and the bullet's going to actually come from his gun. Once you're happy, hit the X button and this will place your soldier on the map. Now we can start by adding in some behaviors. So to add a behavior, you right click, add, and then behavior. If you've never used Construct before, behaviors are just quick ways to change the functionality of a sprite by doing very little work. So the first one that we're going to add is the 8 directions. So I'm just going to double click on it and it's now added. As we've added it, it also gives us some more options on this left-hand side. So first one says, do you want to move in all 8 directions? This means that if we hold 2 keys at the same time, we can move diagonal. Or do you want to only move in 4 directions? If you think very early Pokemon games had this sort of mechanic. There's also left and right and up and down only. If you're doing something like Pong or Brick Breaker, we're going to keep to 8 directions. We're also going to set the angle to no. We can also change speed or any other settings. And one thing that I do like turning on is the allow sliding. I also like adding the allowing sliding option on. This just means that if you walk to a diagonal wall, your character will still move. It won't just stop there. So we can do our first test where we can hit the run. And we'll get this little window up here. And now we can use the arrow keys to move our soldier around the screen. So you can see I can move up, down, and all around. There's a couple of issues, however. He's always facing the same direction. Now, if we kept this angle on, he'll be able to move in opposite directions. We don't want him to turn using the arrow keys. We actually want to control that using the mouse. So let's set this up now. So first thing I'm going to do is right click and insert a new object. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find the mouse. Click insert. And while this hasn't added anything or brought any pop-ups up, we do have a new object type here, and that's really important. So now we can go across to our event sheet, and this is where we're going to do our programming. So I'm going to add in a new event. And the first one that I want is a system event. Now system events have lots of different options that we can use to manipulate our game that don't focus on just a particular object. One of those being the every tick condition. So this will trigger something every game tick, and what we want to do is add an action, and we want to add this action to our player. And just a little bit further down the main options, there's this fantastic option called set angle towards position. And what we can actually do is type in mouse, which is only possible because we've added the mouse object. and then dot, and then X to get the mouse's X position. We can also do the same for the Y axis, so mouse.y, and hit done when we're ready. Now if we go back to our layout and hit play, we're now able to turn around using the mouse. So now we're facing the right way using the mouse, and we can move around the screen as normal. This means that we've got lots of control when moving our player around the screen. So we can now move our player. What next? We should probably get our player to shoot. So the way we do this is right click, insert a new object, and scroll down until you see the word sprite. And this time we're going to type in bullet. And then just click anywhere to start drawing. Now I don't have a bullet, so I'm just going to create one really quickly. So I'm going to use this by just using a range of the different shapes on there. So I'm going to start with a circle. I'm going to reshape it to be a little bit of a bullet. And then I'll just grab a quick line and then just put in a line down the side there. Now you notice there's lots of empty space around my bullet. So first thing I'm going to do is hit the crop button. This will get rid of all that extra blank space. Next thing I'm going to do is get the image point and just make sure it's a rough center. So round about there. Finally, we can check the collision polygon. You'll see that this is not actually a square bullet, it's a rounded bullet. So we need to actually get the hitbox to reflect that. And again, we can double click to add in some extra points for this. So again, I'm just going to go around and just make sure that I've got all the points that I need to get something that looks roughly like the shape that we expect. So we've got that set up, we can hit the X button. Now, next problem we've got is this bullet is absolutely huge. So I'm just going to zoom in. You can also do this with control and the mouse wheel. And I'm going to position my bullet so it's next to the gun like so. And then I'm going to hold shift. And I'm going to resize it until it looks like this bullet can actually fit in the gun. And I think that's a really good size. Once we've done that, we're just going to take our bullet now, we're just going to move it to the top of the screen. So it's actually outside of the level, but we can still see it, we can still click on it. Next, we're going to add the behavior to the bullet. So I'm going to right click, add, and behavior. And we're just going to scroll down, and the one that we're going to use is called the bullet behavior. Now when we add the bullet behavior, we get all these options. So speed is how fast the bullet moves. Acceleration is how quickly it moves to that speed. So you might want a bullet that starts off slower and gets quicker. We can also do the opposite of that and make it so it gets slower over time if you're doing something like a rocket. Gravity, this doesn't really apply to a top-down game, but a platform game you might have it so it sinks after a certain amount of time. And then bounce off solids. They're the main ones that you need to be concerned about. We now have a bullet, we now need to be able to fire it. So I'm going to go back to our event sheet. I'm going to add in a new event. I'm going to use the mouse this time. We're going to use this on click. So we can see, have we clicked down the left button, hit done, and then we can add an action. And this time we're going to take our player, scroll down, and we're using this option called spawn another object. This allows one object to create another object. And we're going to get our player to create a bullet. Now we changed our image point earlier to image point 1, which was at the end of our gun. This means when we shoot, it's actually going to fire out the end of the gun. So with that done, we can hit play once more. And now we can shoot in all directions. Next, we should probably build some sort of a level, because at the moment it's a little bit empty. So I'm going to right click, insert a new object, and scroll down to sprite. And I'm going to create a wall. Click anywhere, and then you can draw your object. So I've gone for quite a traditional wall, but this could be the edge of a building, it could be a fence, it could be anything that's going to stop the player from being able to pass through it. So once you're happy, hit the X button. Next, I recommend just clicking off and actually adding the grid. So we can show the grid and we can snap to it. This means when we resize this, it's going to sit into a 32 by 32 area. We could just stretch it to make it really long, but you'll see that we lose all that hard work that we've put into our design. So I'm going to make it 32 by 32. The next problem that you'll see is that it doesn't actually fit into these boxes. It's sitting on the sort of center point between all the boxes. That's because we're taking the center of the brick instead of the edges or the top corner. To fix this, just go to your grid offset and make it half the size of all your grid tiles, so in my case 16 by 16. And now you'll see it fits in. And then what we want to do is start copy and pasting these bricks, and we're going to use this to make some sort of maze. So I'm going to quickly time lapse this together and we'll have a maze in just a sec. So I've got a rough maze made up. As you can see, that takes quite a lot of time to do, but it will be worth it overall. You might want to actually remove your grid at this point. Remember, show grid and snapped grid are two different options. I also recommend maybe resizing your player. You can see that our player is actually quite large now in this maze. So actually by making them smaller, actually makes our maze bigger. So that's a quick way to get around if your player feels a bit big in the world, is just make it a little bit smaller. Now, one of the other things that we can do is we can actually add a floor to this. Now we can add a floor in the same way, or we can use a different method. We're going to use the different method today. It's going to insert a new object, scroll down and grab a tiled background. I'm just going to call this ground. I'm going to click anywhere, and now I can create an object. Now, unlike what we've done before with our sprites, where we create one object, we can create a pattern that will repeat lots and lots of times. So I'm going to add a new image, and you'll see that I've gone for quite a wooden sort of floor effect. I'm going to hit close, and then what I'm going to do is put this in the top corner and stretch it over my entire map. I'm going to make this quite big as well, just so if I increase my level design later, I don't need to worry about replacing the floor. I can then go back to the start, right click, Z order, and send to bottom layer. This will put everything behind, and now I've got my level put in. Now at this stage we might want to do some changes. So one of the things that I don't like is I think that my floor tiles are a bit too big. So I can scroll down and I can set the image scale. So I can scale this to 50% by 50%. This will make everything smaller, and we can do the same the other way. Depending on what floor type you've got, you might also want to add in the randomize feature. This will randomize the floor tiles, and it will basically rotate each tile slightly. And I actually really like that effect. I was not going to put that on mine, but I'm going to leave it on. We've also got some other options that allow us to change different properties of the object, such as the opacity. So I can put this down, for instance, so you get more of the background come through. I'm actually going to put this up to about 60, just so the floor is not taking up as much as it was beforehand. And that looks much better. And again, you'll see there's lots of other options, such as rotation and general color. So we've got that set up. And if we hit play now, we can move around our level, but we still got some issues. First of all, we're walking through walls. And secondly, we can go off the screen. So these are two issues we need to fix. So let's start with going through walls. We can click on any one of our walls, right click, and add a new behavior. The behavior that we want is the solid behavior. This makes an object impassable, so we can't go through it. And of course, that makes sense for our player. We don't want to go through a wall. So we're going to add the solid behavior. Next, we want to fix the camera issue. So for this, we're going to click on our player, add a new behavior, and we want the scroll to behavior. This means that the player is now the main focus of the camera, and it will follow the player through the level. So if we test it, we can now move around the level, and we can no longer go through the walls. However, there are a couple of issues we can still fix at this stage. First one is we can shoot through walls, which doesn't really make sense. The second one is we can shoot as fast as we can click, which is not very balanced. So we'll fix that as well. First thing I'm going to fix then is our fast clicking. So I'm going to click on my player, right click, and add a new behavior. In terms of behaviors, we want to add the timer. The timer is a really useful behavior that allows us to set a stopwatch and do some checks based on that stopwatch. So I'm going to click add. Then go to my event sheet, and we'll start with this code here. I'm going to add a brand new action. What we're going to do is we're going to do player, scroll down, and start timer. Now the timer that we want, we're going to set the duration to 0.1 seconds, and the tag we'll call fire. The tag can be called whatever you want, it's just a way that you can reference this particular timer. And hit done. We're then going to right click on this mouse option and just add another condition. Go back to our player, and we're looking for the timer once more, and is timer running. Inside the speech marks, we're going to write fire once more, and then finally we're just going to right click and invert. All we're doing is starting a timer every time you shoot and not allowing the player to shoot while that time is running, and that timer runs for 0.1 seconds. Now I want to do a small improvement to this code, because this technically works, we can use it. What we're going to do is right click and add a global variable. Now the name of this is going to be called fire rate. And I'm going to set the initial value to 0.1 seconds, just as we've done with our timer. Now we're going to go to our timer and we're going to change duration to fire rate. This makes absolutely no difference to our code whatsoever. However, when we add more lines of code and we've got 10, 15, or we make a really big game with 100 lines of code, you can just come to the top and change the fire rate really, really quickly without having to scan through all your code. Second thing, we want to fix the fact that our bullets go through walls. So we're going to add an event. I'm going to take our bullet this time, scroll down, and we want this on collision with another object. This is saying what happens when the bullet hits a particular object, in this case our wall, and all we can do is just add an action onto our bullet, and there's an option called destroy, which will remove our bullet from the game. Let's do a test of these two new features. So to show this new feature off properly, I've set my fire rate to 0.5 so I can shoot less bullets. I've also made my bullets blue, so you should be able to see them a little bit easier. So you can see they now get destroyed by a wall, and if I try and spam click, you'll see that I'm only getting one bullet every half a second spawning. So again, you can balance this yourself, and if you've got multiple weapons in your game, you can have them with different fire rates. Now I think it's about time we add some zombies to our map. So back on the main page, by clicking layout 1, I'm going to right click and we're going to insert a new object. Now before we insert a new object, you'll notice that anytime I've clicked on my background. If you ever want to fix this, just right click, go down to lock and lock selection. This means my background is now locked and I can't actually click on it. If I ever want to change my background settings again, I just right click, lock, and unlock all. So we'll go back to inserting our new object, scroll down, go to sprite, and this time we're going to create a zombie or an enemy of your choice. Click anywhere, and then I'm just going to port one in. Once again, it's really important that your zombie is facing towards the right. So if it's not, just rotate it so it's facing the right direction. We also want to change the hitbox before we carry on. Now the one that it gave me is pretty close, so all I'm going to do is just edit it slightly. I want to make this quite fair for my player because I don't want the player to be caught by an arm randomly and just die. I want them to be really, really touching the zombie to count as a death. So once I'm happy with that, I can hit the X. And my zombies are really, really big, so I'm just going to place it near my player and just shrink it down to a similar sort of size. And then once you've done that, we're going to place a couple of zombies in our map. So I've got one here, and if I want more, I can use the copy and paste, or I can just drag them out. And I'm just going to place a couple more around the map. And we'll do one more. So we've got our zombies in. However, if we play the game, they're just going to be static objects. They're not going to move. So we need to fix this. So pick one of your zombies, right click. I'm going to add a new behavior. And the behavior that we're going to add is the pathfinding behavior. So you'll find this near the bottom. Now with this one, we've got some properties. We're not actually going to change any of these properties, but one you might want to change is the speed if your zombies are a little bit too fast or too slow. Let's actually get them to move first so we can get a good idea about how fast they're currently moving. So I'm going to go to my event sheet and I'm going to add a new event. I'm going to start with a system event this time. Scroll down and I'm going to use this every X seconds. I'm going to set a time to 0.1 seconds. Now the way that pathfinding works is the zombies will use an algorithm to try and work out the best way to get to the player in the shortest amount of time. However, it takes a bit of time for them to work this out. 0.1 seconds is plenty of time for them to find their way to our player. However, if you've got a really, really big maze or a really big map, it might take them longer, so you might need to increase this time. For our first example, 0.1 is absolutely fine. We're then going to add an action. I'm going to take our zombie, scroll down to our pathfinding settings. We're going to get it to find a path. And like we said, we want it to find a path to our player. So we're going to type in player.x and then on the other line, player.y and hit done. So every 0.1 seconds, it will try and work out where the player is and the best route to get to our player. We need one more event underneath this. This is going to be a zombie once more. Scroll down and there's this on path find. So the moment it's found a path, we can then choose what to do with that. And the most logical thing is to take our zombie and ask it to move along this path. And we're ready to do a test. So now as we're moving around, you'll see our zombies will try and follow us around the level. Now, as I move around, we're going to notice a few issues. First of all, we've got a zombie that's not moving. And secondly, if I keep moving around the circle, you'll start to see that some of our zombies actually stack up, which is not really great. Oh, and actually I can show this best by just staying still and then moving, and we've got a stack of zombies. So we've got two issues that we want to fix. So these can be solved with right-clicking on our zombie to edit its behaviors. This works the exact same way as we've added behaviors before. We just don't need to click on a particular one and add the behavior. So this is just another method. If you want to add a behavior, you can actually use the side panel to add a behavior. And the one that we want is called the custom behavior. Now the custom behavior has some really useful features on it, and we're going to take advantage of one of the big features on it. So I'm going to go to my event sheet. I'm going to use the every tick and go to zombie and just scroll down until we see the option push out of solid. This means if it's in a solid wall, it will push them out so they're able to walk again. And we're just going to set this to nearest. Next thing we're going to do is sort out the grouping of zombies. So I'm going to add an action, and there's lots of methods to do this. Some of these are quite complex. We're going to use a really quick and easy one. We're going to go to zombie, scroll down, and we're looking for the option that says set max speed. And we're actually going to make this a random number. To do this, we type in random, open bracket, the lower end of our random number. So I'm going to say it's going to be a random number between 100, comma, and then 200. As we're randomizing the speed each time, the chance of two zombies moving at the exact same speed at the same time is very unlikely, which means they're less likely to be grouped up. It's not perfect, but it's quick. Final thing is just dealing with the zombie. The reason he's not moving is he's too close to the wall. So all I'm going to do is click on the zombies on the right side. This will select all of my zombies, and I'm going to change the cell size. So what the cell size means is it's actually going to make small 15 pixel centimeter squares that cover the entire map, and it's going to use that to plot the route. If we want to have more accurate maps, we can use 5 pixel squares. However, this will take more processing power to do so use this sparingly. I'm going to stick to 15, and then if we do another test, we should have all our problems fixed. So you see the zombies are moving around. I'm just going to move around the level to try and avoid them, and we'll see how much they group up. You'll see that some zombies actually turned back this time. And if I just stay still so they all come on top of me and then they're all grouped together, as I move around, they should slowly start to ungroup. Now you see this is not perfect by any means. However, what's quite nice for us is it's very unlikely that the player is going to stop and let all the zombies move on top of them, because then they're dead. So next we probably want to be able to shoot the zombies and kill them. So let's work on that system now. I'm going to start by right clicking on our zombie, and we're going to edit an instance variable. And the instance variable that we're going to add is going to be called health. And by default, we're going to say that all zombies have 3 health. This just means that when we're playing the game, it's not going to be one shot kills the zombies. It's going to take a couple of hits, which puts a bit more pressure on the player. We're then going to move to our event sheet. I'm going to add a new event. I'm going to say bullet, scroll down. I'm going to use the same thing that we've done before, on collision with another object. And it's going to be on collision with zombie. Now we need to do a couple of things. First thing I'm going to do is actually take our bullet first and remove it. This is going to stop it phasing through the zombie and hitting multiple zombies in one go. Obviously you can have certain weapons in your game that does that, but in this case this bullet is going to hit one zombie at a time only, and then you need to fire again to hit another zombie behind it. We're then also going to go to our zombie. We're going to scroll down and we're going to subtract from a value. So subtract from health by 1. So you start with 3, then 2, then 1, and then 0, and then we want to kill them. Finally, we should have some way of showing the player that they've hit the zombie with the bullet. Obviously, you're going to see the bullet hit the zombie, but a little bit of extra feedback is always helpful. So we're going to add another action to our zombie. We're going to scroll down until we see the option of set color. And what we've got is an RGB value. So we're going to set the first value to 255, being the color red. Next one being 0 for green and 0 blue. This is going to make our zombies flash red. Once they flash red, we also need to turn this effect off. So we're just going to add one more action from the start of the system and just add in a short pause. I think 0.5 is enough time, but you can play around with this and make this number longer or shorter. And then we just need to go back to the zombie and just reset the color. So again, set color. And this time what we're going to do is going to type in 100 for each value. 100 will actually reset the zombie to its original color. If you try just putting 0, actually set the color to black. So 100 would set it back to its original colors. And hit done. So we've done that first bit, but again, we've not actually killed the zombie, we're just subtracting from its health. We need to actually link the health to killing the zombie. So I'm going to add a new event, zombie, scroll down and compare instance variable. I'm going to see, is the health now equal to 0? Now I personally like doing less than or equal to. If you've got a weapon that does more damage, perhaps, it just means that -1 will still kill the zombie. So if the health is below 0, zombie, and then just go down and destroy. So we can go to layout and we can test this. So I'm just going to shoot. It's going to flash red for a sec. And if I just keep shooting, you can see if we're too close, actually it doesn't work. And all the zombies are destroyed. And again, because of the system that we've set up, we can actually do this while moving around and strafing around, which means we get really fast sort of fluid movement. Now we need a way for the zombies to actually attack us. And I'm going to put into place a really simple health bar. So what I'm going to do is insert a new object. I'm going to scroll down to tiled background. And then we're going to write health. I'm going to click and I'm going to fill this in a green color and just hit fill. Next, I'm going to position this above my player. And I'm going to make it roughly the size that I want it to be. So have a play around, get a nice size of what feels good for a health bar. And then what I also recommend is just check the size is a number that you're going to be able to remember. So mine's 47, just going to up it to 50. That makes a little bit more sense to me. So we actually want our health bar to follow our player. So we're going to right click and add a new behavior. I'm going to use the pin behavior. If you think of a pin on something like a corkboard, it sticks something to something else. And that's essentially what the pin behavior does. So we're going to go back to our event sheet now. And the first thing I'm going to do is set up another global variable. So I'm going to right click and add a global variable, and I'm going to call it health. We then decide how much health the player gets. So I'm going to decide the player gets 5 health, but you can set this to whatever number you want it to be. And then we can start adding in our first events. So the first one we want is to actually stick the health bar to the player. Let's go add an event, system, scroll down until we see the on start of layout option. I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to do health, scroll down and pin to object. Click to choose, and I'm going to choose our player and then just hit done. So we've got that set up. We also need to actually change the health bar to match our health. So what we're going to do is just take advantage of the every tick. Again, you can do this in different ways. This is not the most efficient way. However, it's a really quick and easy way. Also means we're using a lot less events, which is really helpful if you're on the free version. So I'm going to add an action. I'm going to do health, and I want to scroll down until I see the option of set width. And what we're going to use is a really simple formula. So we want that size that we put in. So again, I put the width as 50. So we're going to do 50 divided by, and then the max health. So in this case, the max health is 5. And we're just going to put that in brackets. And then we're going to times that by how much health they've actually got. So when the game starts, they've got 5 health, so it'll fill that bar. As they go down, it will take a fifth of that value. And again, if your size is different, let's say your size is 90 pixels long and you want to have the player to have 100 health, that's just the different change to the formula. So again, the first one is the width of the health bar, the second one is max health, and the final one is current health. Finally, we just need to actually subtract some health now when the player touches a zombie. So we're just going to add an event, player, scroll down, is overlapping another object, and we're going to select our zombie for this, and hit done. And then system, subtract from health by 1. So let's do a test. So you see we've got a health bar, and when the zombies attack, we get this happen. Now this looks very strange because we've got this ginormous health bar, but this is not because our health bar's got bigger, it's because it's got smaller. You see, every time that our player is overlapping a zombie, every single game tick is subtracting 1 from the health. So what it's doing is making a health bar that is in the minus numbers, which is still actually a size, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What we want is to subtract 1 only, wait a certain amount of time, and then allow the player to get hit again. So there's a couple of ways that we can solve this problem. One of the ways that I like is adding iframes, something you might see in Mario, so invincible frames. So I'm going to right click on my player, edit behaviors. I'm going to add in a brand new behavior, and the behavior that we want is called flash. And just hit the X button. So we're going to say if the player is overlapping a zombie, we're going to subtract 1 from the health. We're going to go to our player. I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to do a flash. This will cause the player to flash on and off really, really quickly. So 0.1 on, 0.1 off, and repeat for a second. So now we've got the flash on, we can actually link this up to our condition. So I'm going to right click, add another condition to our player, scroll down, and we've got this is flashing. And again, we're just going to right click and invert this, just like we did with our mouse fire. So now we can only take a hit if we're not flashing, and every time we take a hit, we flash for 1 second. Just like with our fire rate, we can also hit this up to a variable. So right click, add a global variable, and we can do iframes. And again, I'm just going to set this to 1 second. And we're just going to click back on our flash and set the durations to iframes. This just means we can quickly change how invulnerable we are, so we can balance the game much more quicker. So if we do one more test, we now take a hit, and every time we take a hit, our health bar gets a little bit smaller, and we get that 1 second of invulnerability. And then finally, when we get hit, our health bar will go the other way now because we're into the negative numbers. So final thing we should probably do is make it so if we do die, the game restarts. So I'm going to add an event. I'm going to use system, compare variable, and health. I'm just going to say it's health less than or equal to 0. Add action. I'm just going to do system, scroll down, and restart layout. Now we could finish the game here, but there's only so many zombies on the map. We want a way to add new zombies. So what we're going to do is go to our layout, going to right click and insert a new object. And we're going to scroll down till we see sprites, and we're going to create a spawner. Click anywhere, and what I'm going to do is just fill this in with a bright red color because our spawner is going to be invisible. Now I'm also going to make my spawner a little bit smaller, so I'm going to shrink it right down. About that size is absolutely fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this around the map in locations where a zombie could spawn. And I'm mainly placing this in corners. Now there are lots of different ways that you could approach getting zombies to spawn. I like this method because it gives you a lot of control and it avoids issues like zombies spawning inside of walls. However, for a player who knows the game quite well, they'll be able to know all the main spawning locations and could take advantage of that. So I'm just going to place a number of these around the map. We could also place them in the center, just like so. It doesn't matter because we're going to have a different system in place to make sure that no zombies spawn on top of a player. So I've got all my spawners in that I want to put in. I'm going to click on the spawners on the right hand side and just set initially visible to off so you can't see them on the map. I'm then going to add an event, scroll down, and add a new event below. Go back to system, scroll to the bottom, and we'll use this every X seconds. And what we're going to do is create another random. And inside the random, we're going to have a rough spawn rate of how often zombies spawn. For me, I'm going to go between 3 and 10 seconds, a new zombie will spawn. However, you might want to play around with these numbers depending on how your game currently feels. And hit done. Now we also want to right click and add another condition to this. This is going to be a system condition. And there's a really useful condition that we can use, which is pick random instance. This will allow you to pick one object of a set, so we can pick one random spawner on the map. And hit done. And then finally we can add an action to that, and we can use spawner. And just like we did with our player and the bullet, we can do the same thing with our spawner and the zombie. Spawn another object and spawn a zombie. So now every 3 to 10 seconds, a new zombie will spawn, and it will pick one of these random locations to spawn our zombie in. However, we talked about the issue of we don't want a zombie to spawn on the player. This system does not fix that. Now we can do checks and pick a spawner that's away from the player. However, this creates a new problem of the player might sit in a corner and they can get away with that. So we're going to have a different system in mind. So what I'm going to do is right click and insert a new object. Scroll down and create a new sprite. And I'm going to call it zombie warning. Now, because I'm dealing with zombies, I want sort of a green sort of zombie color. And all I'm going to do is create a circle. Just like so. Crop the edges and then hit the blue X. Now I want this to be slightly bigger than a zombie, but not too big. So I'm going to shrink it down, and I think that size is pretty good. I'm just going to place it at the top of the map. And then I'm going to right click and add a new behavior. And I'm going to use a behavior called tween. Tween is one of my favorite behaviors. All it does is you give it one property and then another property, and it will animate between those two. So for instance, if you want to start an object at the coordinates 0, 0, and then get to move to 50, 50, it's going to teleporting there, it would animate between the two. So we've got that set up. But what's the point of this? Well, what we're going to do is, instead of spawning a zombie every 3 to 10 seconds, I'm going to double click on this, and instead of a zombie, I'm going to spawn a zombie warning. I'm also going to add an action, and it's going to be on the zombie warning. I'm going to first scroll down, and I want to do move to object, and I want to move it behind our walls, just so it's not over the top. It makes no sense. It should be something that's on the floor. Next, I'm going to go back to my zombie warning, and I'm going to add the first tween option. So we're going to do tween two properties. We're going to do size, and we want the end size to be 0, 0. And then we'll do about 3 seconds on the time. In terms of tags, we'll just call this warning and hit done. Finally, we're going to add one more event on the zombie warning, scroll down, and we're just going to put on finished. That's going to ask you for a tag. Our tag was warning. And then we're going to get the zombie warning to spawn a new zombie. So spawn another object, being a zombie. And then we're going to delete the zombie warning. So obviously a lot of code just happened in quite a short amount of time. But essentially what we're doing is spawning a green circle on the floor, which will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And when it gets to the size where it's too small and it disappears, we then spawn a zombie. This means you've got 3 seconds warning that a zombie is going to spawn on that particular spot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a load of health, and then let's test this. And the reason I'm giving myself a lot of health is so we can actually see it before I die. So there's my lovely amount of health. And you see that green circle appearing, and then a zombie spawn. So another zombie spawning here. And we'll see if we can see one more. There we go, there's another one as well. So this is just a way to actually give a little bit of information back to the player without having a way that they can just abuse a corner and just sit there. Finally, another thing that I just want to fix before we end this video off is something to do with the health bar and additional controls if you want to use the arrow keys to move. So let's start with the health first. You'll notice that when I increased my health, the health bar increased as well, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste the health variable. So we've got health 2. We're going to call health 2 health max. And I'm going to set it to what the max health is. So in this case, say 50. I'm then going to go to this bit of code. And it's going to divide in by 5, or whatever number you've put. I'm going to divide it by max health, or health max, as I've called it. And this just means that you can now set the health to any value and the max health, and it will still work. So if you want to give yourself more health, you can do that. So I want to say, okay, I've got 100 max health, and my player's going to start with 50 health. So it just gives you that little bit of extra control. Finally, I talked about you might want to use the keyboard instead to move around. So for this, we're just going to right click on the object types to add a new object. Again, this is what we've done before, where we've just right clicked and insert a new object. Just as the exact same way, it's just a different method of getting to this option. We're going to add in a keyboard. We're then going to go to our event sheets and just scroll to the bottom. And what we're going to do is set up WASD, not the arrow keys like I've just said. So we're going to add a new event, keyboard, on key down. We'll start by going up first, so I'm going to press W, hit done, and then for your action, you're going to go to player, simulate control, and we want to simulate the player moving up. Once we've done that, we can click on the left side, copy this another 3 times, and just change each one. So instead of moving W, we're going to use A. We can then change this one to be D, and the last one to be S. And then you also need to remember to change the different directions. So again, if I'm pressing A, I also want to be able to move left. And so on and so forth until we've got all directions covered, and we can use that to move around in our game. So again, just another way of setting up your controls down to personal preference. But that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, there's lots more on my channel where we show you how to make lots of different construct games. If this video gets to 200 likes, we'll even do a part 2 where you can do multiple weapons, have money that you can collect, and open multiple doors. For now, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.